The first thing I noticed when I pulled into our driveway was the "sold" sign stabbed into our front lawn like a knife through my heart. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I stared at the empty space where my father's truck should have been. Instead, there sat a gleaming red Porsche 911 that I'd never seen before. My name is Valentina, and after spending 3 months teaching art to underprivileged kids in Guatemala, I'd expected a warm welcome home. Not this. I fumbled for my phone and called my mother. She picked up on the first ring. "Val, honey, you're back." "Mom, why is there a sold sign in front of our house?" The silence on the other end made my stomach turn. "We were going to tell you?" She started, her voice small. "Why don't you come inside? We can explain everything." I grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat and marched up the familiar path to our front door. The garden I'd planted last spring was overgrown with weeds. Mom opened the door before I could use my key. "Surprise." Rowan's voice boomed from behind her. My younger brother bounded forward, practically vibrating with excitement. "Check out my new ride. Isn't she beautiful?" I looked from my mother's nervous face to Rowan's beaming one. "You sold our house for a car?" "It's not just any car," Rowan protested. "It's a Porsche 911 GT3. Do you know how rare these are?" "Where's Dad?" I demanded, pushing past them into the house. "At the shop," Mom said, wringing her hands. "He's been working late these days." I walked through our home, my childhood home, taking in the half-packed boxes scattered everywhere. Family photos were missing from the walls, leaving behind pale rectangles on the faded wallpaper. "When do we have to move out?" My voice cracked. 2 weeks, Mom whispered. 2 weeks? I spun around. "And where exactly are we moving to?" Rowan shrugged. "Mom and Dad are getting an apartment. I'm staying with Kyle until I figure something out." "You're kidding me." I sank onto the couch, our old leather couch where Dad used to read me stories. "Please tell me this is some sick joke." "Val, honey." Mom sat beside me, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "We know it's a shock, but—" My phone buzzed. A text from Gia. "Heard you're back. Come over?" "I can't do this right now." I stood up, grabbing my backpack. "I need some air." "But you just got here," Mom called after me. "We haven't even heard about your trip." "Maybe you should have thought about that before selling the house I grew up in without telling me." I slammed the door behind me, nearly running into Rowan's precious Porsche. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Gia's kitchen, clutching a mug of tea while she listened to me rant. "They didn't even call you?" she asked, eyes wide. "Not a word. 3 months of spotty internet in Guatemala, and not once did they mention, 'Oh, by the way, we're selling the house so your brother can play Fast and Furious.'" "You can stay here as long as you need," Gia offered immediately. "The spare room's yours." "Thanks." I took a shaky breath. "I just don't understand. Mom and Dad always said this house was their retirement plan. Why would they—" My phone rang. Mom again. I declined the call. "There's gotta be more to this story," Gia said, refilling my mug. "Your parents aren't usually this impulsive." "You didn't see Rowan," I muttered. He was practically dancing. Meanwhile, Mom looked like she was about to throw up. Another call, this time from an unknown number. I was about to decline it when Gia grabbed my wrist. "That's Whitney's number, from the bank," she said. "You might want to take that," I answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello? Valentina, this is Whitney Jensen from First National. I'm calling about your family's accounts." She paused. "I think there's something you need to know." My heart dropped as I met Gia's concerned gaze. Whatever Whitney had to say, I knew my homecoming was about to get even worse. "What's going on?" I asked. "I probably shouldn't be making this call," Whitney said, her voice low. "But I've known your family for years, and, well, the house sale isn't just about your brother's car. Your mother's been hiding something, and it's about to come crashing down on all of you." I gripped the phone tighter, my tea growing cold beside me. "I'm listening." I sat at our kitchen table the next morning, surrounded by scattered papers and credit card statements that Whitney had helped me obtain. My mother's hands shook as she poured coffee, spilling drops onto the growing pile of bills. $170,000, I said, my voice flat. How did you hide this much debt from Dad? Mom collapsed into a chair. I was trying to protect everyone. By maxing out credit cards? Taking out personal loans? I held up a statement. Mom, there's a shopping spree here for $5,000 from last month. Your father's business was struggling, she whispered. I had to maintain appearances, for clients, for the community. The front door slammed and Dad trudged in, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His construction company shirt was covered in dust. You're home early, Mom said, quickly trying to gather the papers. Leave them, I ordered. He needs to see this. Dad's eyes narrowed. See what? Sit down, Dad. We need to talk about why the house was really sold. The next hour was brutal. Dad's face turned from confusion to shock to fury as I laid out the evidence. Mom's secret credit cards, the personal loans, the second mortgage she'd taken out without telling him. The car dealership, Dad said suddenly, turning to Mom. You told me we had the money for Rowan's down payment. I got another loan, she admitted. The house sale was supposed to cover everything, give us a fresh start. A fresh start? I laughed bitterly. The house sold for $320. After paying off your debts and Rowan's car, you'll barely have enough for first and last month's rent on an apartment. The screen door creaked and Rowan walked in, keys jingling in his hand. Why is everyone looking so serious? Perfect timing, I said. How much did that car cost? He grinned. $120, but I got a great deal. Sit down, Dad growled. Your mother and I need to explain something. As the truth came out, Rowan's face crumpled. But you said we could afford it. You said... We lied, Mom whispered. I lied. To everyone. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Whitney from the bank standing on our porch, holding a thick envelope. Come in, I called out. Whitney entered, her professional demeanor cracking slightly at the tension in the room. I hate to make this worse, but there's something else you need to know. She placed the envelope on the table. The bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings on your business property, Stanley. Dad's face went white. What? The last 3 mortgage payments bounced, Whitney explained gently. With the credit issues we've uncovered, I'm sorry, but the bank has to protect its interests. My shop, Dad mumbled. Everything I built. There might be a way, Whitney said, glancing at me. If you can secure alternative financing within 30 days, I'll sell the car, Rowan interrupted. Everyone turned to look at him. We can use that money, right? Mom reached for his hand. Honey, the car loan is underwater. We'd lose money selling it now. This is insane. I stood up, pacing. I leave for 3 months and everything falls apart? What happened to the responsible parents who taught me to balance my checkbook? Who made me save half my allowance? We got lost, Dad said quietly. Somewhere between keeping up appearances and not wanting to disappoint anyone. Well, congratulations. You've disappointed everyone. I turned to Whitney. What exactly would it take to stop the foreclosure? She named a figure that made my stomach clench. It was almost exactly what I had in my secret account. Money from art sales I'd been squirreling away for years. I might be able to help, I said slowly. But things are going to change around here. Starting with complete transparency. No more secrets, no more lies. You'd do that? Mom asked, tears in her eyes. After how we've treated you, I'm not doing it for you, I said firmly. I'm doing it because I refuse to watch this family implode. But there will be conditions, strict ones. Anything, Dad said. We'll start with financial counseling. All of us. I looked at Rowan. And that car? It's going up for sale tomorrow, whether we take a loss or not. Consider it the price of your lesson in consequences. Whitney pulled out her business card. I can recommend someone. A financial advisor who specializes in family debt restructuring. As everyone nodded their agreement, my phone buzzed. A notification from my art dealer. Another piece had sold, for more than I'd ever gotten before. I looked around at my broken family, Mom's shame, Dad's defeat, Rowan's guilt, and felt a strange mix of anger and determination. They'd never taken my art seriously, had they? Never believed I could make real money from it. Well, they were about to learn just how wrong they'd been. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the sweetest revenge of all. The financial advisor's office felt too small for the 5 of us. Mom kept fidgeting with her purse strap while Dad stared at the floor. Rowan slouched in his chair, trying to look anywhere but at the spreadsheet displayed on the advisor's screen. Let me get this straight. Sarah, the advisor, said. You want to use your savings to stop the foreclosure and help restructure your family's debt? Yes, I replied, sliding my bank statements across her desk. But I have conditions. Sarah raised an eyebrow as she reviewed my finances. This is impressive. Your art sales have been consistently growing. I caught Mom's startled expression from the corner of my eye. You've been selling your paintings? She asked. For these amounts? Surprised? I kept my voice neutral. Turns out those art classes you called a waste of time weren't so useless after all. Sarah cleared her throat. Let's discuss your conditions, Valentina. I pulled out a document I'd prepared. First, I want my name on the house deed when we buy it back. Second, everyone in this room gets access to a budgeting app where all expenses must be logged. Third, weekly family meetings to review finances. That's ridiculous, Rowan protested. I'm an adult. An adult who lived at home rent-free while buying a luxury car, I shot back. You want my help? These are my terms. Dad leaned forward. What else? Mom and Dad need separate bank accounts. No more secret credit cards. And Rowan? I turned to my brother. You'll pay rent. To me. The room fell silent. Sarah nodded approvingly as she reviewed my terms. These are actually very reasonable conditions, she said. I've seen families torn apart by less than this. You're lucky Valentina's willing to help. Lucky? I laughed. They're lucky I didn't let everything crash and burn, which I seriously considered. Val. Mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. Don't. This isn't forgiveness. This is me preventing a disaster and making sure it never happens again. My phone buzzed. Another notification from my art dealer. I checked it and nearly dropped my phone. Everything okay? Sarah asked. My latest piece just sold. For $15,000. Rowan whistled. 15 grand for one painting? It's a triptych, I said automatically, then caught myself. Not that you'd know what that means since you never came to any of my shows. When can we start the restructuring process? Dad interrupted, his voice heavy with shame. Sarah pulled out more papers. We can begin today. But first, everyone needs to sign these agreements accepting Valentina's conditions. One by one, they signed. Mom's hand trembled so badly she had to start over. When Rowan's turn came, he hesitated. The car really has to go? The car that's worth less than you owe? Yes. I stood up and walked to the window. In fact, we're going to the dealership right after this. I already made an appointment. You what? Did you think I was joking about taking control? I turned back to face them. This isn't a negotiation. It's a rescue mission with rules. 2 hours later, we stood in the dealership as Rowan handed over his keys. The salesman's fake sympathy was almost worse than the significant loss we had to pay to get out of the loan. I hate you, Rowan muttered as we walked out. Hate me all you want, I replied. But remember this feeling the next time you want to make a stupid financial decision. Back at home, I was packing more boxes when Jonah, my colleague from school, stopped by. He'd been the first person to buy one of my paintings years ago. I heard about your big sale, he said, helping me wrap photo frames. The gallery owner called me. She wants to know if you'd consider a solo show. I nearly dropped the frame I was holding. What? Apparently, your last few pieces caught the attention of some serious collectors. They want to see more. Mom appeared in the doorway carrying a box labeled kitchen. A solo show? Val, that's wonderful. Is it? I asked coldly. I thought art was just a hobby, something to do between real jobs. Mom set down the box. I was wrong. We were all wrong. I see that now. Too little, too late. Maybe, Jonah said gently. This is your chance to show them exactly what you're capable of. I looked around the half-packed house at the spaces where my paintings used to hang. Mom had sold them at a garage sale years ago, calling them clutter. Now my art was worth more than they could imagine. You know what? I said, a plan forming in my mind. You're right. Tell the gallery owner I'm in. And Mom? I turned to her, my voice firm. You and Dad are going to help set it up, every last detail. Consider it part of your education. The look on her face was worth every penny I was about to spend saving this family from themselves. The bank is willing to halt the foreclosure proceedings, Whitney said, spreading documents across her desk. But we need to move quickly. The funds must be transferred within 48 hours. I nodded, sliding my cashier's check across the desk. Here's the down payment. The rest will be wired this afternoon. Whitney studied me with a mix of admiration and concern. Are you absolutely sure about this, Valentina? It's a lot of money. I'm sure about one thing. I'm not losing our home. I picked up the pen. Where do I sign? As I scrawled my signature across multiple pages, my phone kept buzzing. Mom had sent 15 texts since breakfast, all about the upcoming gallery show. Your mother seems excited, Whitney observed, noticing my phone's constant movement. She's trying to make up for lost time. Yesterday, she actually asked me to explain the difference between oils and acrylics. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Funny how interest follows money. The door to Whitney's office burst open. Jonah rushed in, out of breath. Sorry to interrupt, but Val, you need to see this. He thrust his phone at me. On the screen was a local news article. Luxury car theft ring busted. Multiple vehicles recovered. My heart stopped as I read further. There, in the list of recovered vehicles, was a red Porsche 911 GT3, the exact model Rowan had bought. The car dealer who sold to Rowan, Jonah explained. He was part of the ring. They were selling stolen cars with clean titles. Whitney immediately started typing on her computer. This could complicate things. If the car was stolen property, it means Rowan's loan might be void. I finished. And the loss we took selling it could be recoverable, Whitney confirmed. But you'll need to act fast. That car's going to auction in 3 days. I looked at the stack of papers we'd just finished signing. Can you hold these until tomorrow? I need to make some calls. An hour later, I sat in a detective's office while he confirmed what Jonah had discovered. The car had indeed been stolen and the dealer was in custody. Your brother's lucky, the detective said. Some of these vehicles were sold to drug traffickers. He could have been caught up in something much worse. Back at home, I found Rowan sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He'd been moping ever since selling the car. Get up, I ordered. We need to talk. More lectures about financial responsibility? He muttered. I tossed the news article onto his lap. No, lectures about how your dream car was actually stolen property. He sat up so fast, he dropped his phone. What? The dealer's been arrested. The car's going to auction. I crossed my arms. Care to guess who has power of attorney over all family legal matters now? Rowan's face went through several emotions before settling on hope. You mean, I can file a claim to recover our losses, but first... I sat down beside him. Tell me the truth. Did you know? About the car being stolen? No, I swear. He ran his hands through his hair. I wanted it so bad. The dealer said he could make it happen even with my credit score. And that didn't raise any red flags? I guess I didn't want to see them. He looked at me properly for the first time in days. Are you going to help get the money back? Yes, I said, but not for you. For the family. And you're going to earn it back. Every penny. How? You're going to help set up my gallery show. Heavy lifting, running errands, whatever needs doing, and... I smiled slightly. You're going to learn about art, real art, starting with the difference between oils and acrylics. He groaned. Seriously? Dead seriously. Mom's already studying. Dad's been watching art history documentaries. Your turn. My phone buzzed again. The gallery owner this time. I answered on speaker. Valentina, we need to move your show up. There's been huge interest since your last sale. How's next month? I watched Rowan's eyes widen at the professional tone in her voice, the obvious respect. Next month works, I replied. My family's helping with setup. Excellent. We'll need at least 15 pieces. After hanging up, I turned to Rowan. Still think art's just a hobby? He shook his head. I was wrong. We all were. He paused. Val? Thanks for not letting everything fall apart. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the study schedule I made for you. As I walked upstairs to my makeshift studio, I heard him call after me. Hey, what are oils and acrylics anyway? I smiled despite myself. Maybe, just maybe, this revenge was teaching them more than I'd planned. And somewhere between their humbling and my rising success, I was finding a satisfaction deeper than anger. But we weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. The police auction house buzzed with tension as Dad, Rowan, and I sat in the crowded room. The red Porsche gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. Lot number 47, the auctioneer announced. 2023 Porsche 911 GT3, recovered from illegal sales ring. Rowan shifted in his seat. I can't believe I didn't notice anything wrong with the paperwork. Because you didn't bother to read it, I muttered, clutching our lawyer's briefcase. Lucky for you, I read everything now. The bidding started. We watched as the price climbed steadily upward, already exceeding what Rowan had paid. Dad's hands were clenched tight in his lap. Going once at $145,000. I glanced at our lawyer, who nodded. We had the documentation ready. Proof of our previous purchase, the fraud claim, everything needed to recover our losses. Sold to bidder number 183. As the crowd thinned out, our lawyer approached the auction officials. 20 minutes later, we walked out with a check that would cover not just our losses, but provide a decent settlement for the fraud. I don't deserve this, Rowan said quietly as we drove home. No, you don't, I agreed. But the family needs it, and you're going to earn it back. We pulled into our driveway. My driveway now, technically, to find Mom standing on the porch with Gia. They were surrounded by large canvases. Your latest pieces arrived from the framer, Mom called out, actually bouncing with excitement. Wait until you see how beautiful they look. I turned to Rowan. Ready for your first art lesson? He groaned but followed me up the path. Over the past week, he'd been surprisingly diligent about studying the art books I'd assigned him. This one, Mom said, pointing to a large abstract piece, is done in oils, right? I can tell by the texture and the way the colors blend. Very good, I said, trying not to smile at her eagerness. What else do you notice? The composition draws your eye in a spiral, Rowan offered hesitantly. Like that thing you made me read about? The golden ratio? Gia's eyebrows shot up. Someone's been studying. He better be, I said. The gallery opening's in 3 weeks, and he's giving tours. I'm what? Rowan's face went pale. You heard me. You're going to explain every piece to potential buyers, which means you need to understand them completely. Dad emerged from his workshop covered in sawdust. He'd been building display pedestals for my sculptures, throwing himself into the project with unexpected enthusiasm. The bases are almost done, he said. Use that special finish you wanted. Cost a fortune, but... He shrugged. Quality matters in art, right? I blinked hard, fighting unexpected tears. Where was this support when I was in high school, begging for art supplies? When I was in college, changing my major to art education despite their disapproval? My phone rang. The gallery owner again. Valentina? We have a problem. Our featured artist for next week canceled. We'd like to move your show up. Can you be ready in 8 days? I looked at my family, all frozen in anticipation of my answer. I'll need help. Lots of it. You have it, Mom said immediately. Whatever you need. Even if it means missing your book club? She flushed. I canceled my membership. It was an unnecessary expense. And I sold my gaming system, Rowan added. Been using the time to study instead. I turned back to my phone. We'll be ready in 8 days. After hanging up, I addressed my family. Okay, new schedule. Dad, those pedestals need to be done in 4 days. Mom, you're in charge of the guest list and refreshments, on a budget. Rowan, we're doubling your study sessions. What about me? Gia asked. You're keeping me sane. I picked up one of the canvases. And helping me decide where each piece should hang for maximum impact. As everyone scattered to their tasks, I caught Rowan studying one of my paintings intently. This one, he said slowly. It's about us, isn't it? The broken pieces coming back together? I stepped closer. The painting showed shattered glass reforming into a stronger, more beautiful pattern. Maybe, I admitted. Art is open to interpretation. I get it now, he said quietly. Why you were so angry? We never saw you. Really saw you. Not until you forced us to look. Through revenge? He shook his head. Through teaching us to see beauty in broken things. From the workshop came the sound of Dad's saw. Mom's voice drifted from the kitchen as she canceled another unnecessary subscription. Gia was measuring wall spaces, muttering about lighting angles. 8 days, I said. Think you can learn enough by then? Rowan picked up another art book from the stack I'd given him. I'm starting to realize there's a lot more to learn than just oils and acrylics. I watched him settle onto the couch, actually opening the book without being prompted. Maybe this revenge wasn't just about making them see me. Maybe it was about helping them see themselves more clearly, too. The lighting's wrong, I said, staring at the gallery walls. The shadows are falling directly on the focal points. It was 2 days before the opening, and everything that could go wrong was. The catering company Mom had booked canceled last minute. 3 of Dad's pedestals needed reinforcement, and Rowan was having a panic attack about public speaking. We can adjust the track lighting, Gia suggested, already climbing the ladder. Maybe if we angle them more toward the corners? The gallery door chimed. Jonah walked in carrying a stack of programs. Fresh from the printer, and you've got 2 reporters confirmed for opening night. Reporters? Rowan looked up from where he was practicing his art terminology. Like, real ones? From the city paper and an online arts magazine. Jonah handed me a program. They're interested in the local artist makes good angle. Local artist saves family and forces cultural education, Gia muttered, adjusting another light. Mom burst through the door, slightly out of breath. I found a new caterer. They can do it for half the original budget, and they're available. What's the catch? I asked, knowing there had to be one. Well, she hesitated. They're students from the culinary school, but they're talented. I tried their samples. Did you check their references? Mom pulled out her phone, showing me a detailed spreadsheet. 3 events in the past month, all with good reviews. I also calculated cost per head, factored in a 20% contingency for extras, and built in a cancellation clause. I stared at her. This was the same woman who'd hidden credit card bills in potted plants. The financial counseling is really helping, she said quietly. I'm learning to research everything, plan ahead, consider consequences. Mom's been teaching me too, Rowan added. Did you know there's an app that calculates compound interest? The numbers are terrifying. Dad appeared from the back room, wiping varnish from his hands. Pedestals are fixed. Double reinforced the bases, added stabilizers. They're not going anywhere. Unlike our savings, Mom said, then quickly added, that was a joke. A bad one. Sorry. I checked my watch. Rowan, run through your tour speech again. Start with the triptych. He stood straighter, gesturing to the 3-panel piece. This work explores themes of fragmentation and reunion. Notice how the artist uses contrasting textures, smooth versus impasto, to create tension between the panels. The color palette suggests both conflict and resolution. He's actually good at this, Gia whispered to me. Who knew your brother had an eye for art? Speaking of eyes, Jonah interrupted. You need to see this. He held up his tablet, showing an email from a prestigious gallery in the city. They're interested in your work. Want to discuss representation. The room fell silent. Even Gia stopped adjusting lights. The city? Mom breathed. That's huge. It's an opportunity, I said carefully. But my focus needs to be here right now. No, Rowan said firmly. You can't pass this up. Not for us. Watch me. I turned back to the lighting issue, but Dad stepped in front of me. Valentina, he said, using my full name for the first time in years. We've held you back enough. This isn't about, yes, it is. Mom joined him. We failed to support your dreams for years. We're not doing it again. But the family finances are under control, Mom finished. Thanks to you. The debt restructuring is working. We're sticking to our budgets. Even Rowan got a part-time job. Assistant at the art supply store. Rowan grinned. Employee discount on canvas and oils. I looked around the gallery, at the perfectly spaced paintings, the solid pedestals, the carefully planned lighting. At my family, working together, learning together. The City Gallery wants to meet next week, Jonah said. After your opening here. You should go, Gia added. They're right. You've done enough heavy lifting for this family. My phone buzzed. A notification from our shared budgeting app. Dad had logged his latest business expense, properly categorized and with a receipt attached. Mom had recorded canceling another unnecessary subscription. Rowan had deposited his first paycheck. Maybe, I said slowly. It's time to trust you all can stand on your own. We won't let you down, Mom promised. Not again. Besides, Rowan added with a smirk, I need to prove I can explain art better than those city gallery guides. The lighting's perfect now, Gia called from the ladder. Want to see? She flipped a switch and suddenly my work came alive on the walls. The shadows fell exactly where they should, highlighting every texture, every carefully chosen color. It's beautiful, Dad said softly. Just like we always should have seen it. I swallowed hard, looking at my family in the gallery's gentle light. They'd changed. We'd all changed. Maybe revenge didn't have to mean watching them fall. Maybe it could mean watching them rise instead. Okay, I said. After the opening, I'll take the meeting in the city. That's my girl. Dad smiled. Now, let's make the show unforgettable. Opening night buzzed with energy as people filled the gallery. The student caterers circulated with elegant hors d'oeuvres, while Mom worked the room like a seasoned socialite, albeit one who kept meticulous track of every expense on her phone. And this piece, I heard Rowan telling a group of collectors, represents the transformation of chaos into order. Notice how the brushstrokes become more controlled as your eye moves across the canvas. He's a natural, Jonah said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. That's the third group he's impressed tonight. A reporter from the city paper approached, notebook in hand. Valentina, could we do that interview now? Before I could answer, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A well-known collector from the city had arrived, Marcus Sterling, famous for launching artists' careers with his purchases. Did you invite him? I whispered to Gia. Didn't have to. Your last piece caught his eye at an auction. I watched as Marcus moved through the gallery, studying each work intently. Dad hovered nearby, ready to explain the custom pedestals he'd built. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Your father's craftsmanship is exceptional, Marcus commented, running a hand along one of the bases. It complements the sculptures perfectly. Was this a collaborative vision? Actually, Dad said, my daughter taught me everything I know about presentation. I used to think art was just about the piece itself, but she showed me how every element matters. Marcus nodded approvingly before moving to the triptych that had started everything. Rowan was already there, launching into his practiced explanation. The artist uses negative space to create tension between connection and separation. It's a deeply personal work about family dynamics. You seem very familiar with the piece, Marcus observed. Rowan's voice caught slightly. I am. It's about my family. About how we almost lost everything, including each other. The reporter scribbled frantically in her notebook. And now? Marcus asked. Now we're learning. About art, about responsibility, about really seeing each other. Rowan met my eyes across the room. My sister's work taught us that. Marcus turned to me. Your brother's interpretation is quite moving, as is your mother's obvious dedication to managing this event. They've changed, I said simply. As have you, I expect. He gestured to the paintings. Your earlier work showed anger, rebellion. These newer pieces speak of transformation, redemption even. The reporter edged closer, still writing. Sometimes, I said carefully, revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. It's about building something better from the ruins. Speaking of building, Marcus pulled out his checkbook. I'd like to acquire the triptych and discuss featuring your work in my gallery's upcoming Modern Artists Showcase. The room seemed to hold its breath. Mom stopped mid-conversation. Dad's hand froze on a pedestal. Rowan actually crossed his fingers. The triptych isn't for sale, I said firmly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm prepared to offer. It belongs to my family, I interrupted, but I have several new pieces I'd be happy to show you. A slow smile spread across his face. Even better. An artist who knows the value of both commerce and sentiment. He turned to the reporter. You'll want to note this moment. You're watching the birth of a significant new voice in contemporary art. The next hour passed in a blur of sales, interviews, and congratulations. 3 pieces sold to serious collectors. The arts magazine wanted to do a feature. Marcus's gallery assistant scheduled a meeting for next week. Finally, as the crowd thinned, my family gathered around the triptych. You could have sold it, Rowan said. It would have covered a lot of the remaining debt. Some things are worth more than money, I replied. Besides, you need it to practice your art lectures on. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. I keep thinking about how we almost lost everything. Our home, our relationships, our dignity. But we didn't, Dad said firmly. Thanks to Val. Thanks to all of us, I corrected. You had to be willing to change. Speaking of change, Gia called from the entrance. Your last guest wants to say goodbye. Whitney from the bank stepped forward, holding a folder. I brought something to celebrate your success. She handed me the folder. The final paperwork. The house is officially in your name and the family debt consolidation is complete. Mom started crying again. Dad put his arm around her. One last thing, Whitney said. The bank's trust department is very impressed with how you've handled everything. They'd like to discuss managing your art sales proceeds. I looked at Mom. Want to sit in on that meeting? Put your new financial skills to work? She beamed through her tears. I'd love that. As we locked up the gallery later that night, I paused in front of the triptych. The middle panel showed broken pieces swirling in chaos. The final panel revealed those same pieces forming something new, something stronger. Ready to go home? Rowan asked, emphasizing the word home. I nodded, thinking of the house that was now mine, the family that was finally whole, and the revenge that had turned into restoration. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The morning sun streamed through our living room windows, highlighting the triptych that now hung in pride of place above the fireplace. Mom sat at the dining table, reviewing spreadsheets for my upcoming city gallery show, while Dad measured wall space for new installations. The budget looks solid, Mom said, tapping her calculator, even with the upgraded shipping crates you wanted. Look who's talking about upgraded anything, I teased. Remember when you bought generic paper towels for the first time? I thought you were going to cry. I did cry, she admitted. But now I calculate how much we save annually by buying generic, and that makes me cry happy tears instead. The front door opened and Rowan burst in, still wearing his art store apron. Val, you have to see this. He thrust a magazine at me. Page 32. I flipped to the page and froze. There was a full-page feature about emerging artists, with my triptych prominently displayed. Read the last paragraph, Rowan urged. Perhaps most remarkable is not just McBride's artistic talent, I read aloud, but the story behind her rise. In saving her family from financial ruin, she transformed not just their circumstances, but their understanding of art, value, and family itself. They interviewed me for that piece, Rowan said proudly. The reporter said I explained the symbolism better than some professional critics. Dad looked up from his measuring. Speaking of explaining things, don't you have that school presentation today? Yeah, career day at the high school. Rowan straightened his apron. I'm talking about careers in art and gallery management. Can you believe it? More than I can believe these bank statements, Mom muttered, but she was smiling. Our credit scores have all gone up another 20 points. The doorbell rang. Gia and Jonah stood on the porch, carrying coffee and pastries. Emergency meeting, Gia announced, sweeping in. Marcus Sterling's assistant just called. He wants to move up the city show by 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Mom immediately reached for her planning notebook. We'll need to adjust the shipping schedule, revise the catering deposits. Already handled, Jonah said. The real issue is the new piece he requested. He wants something that captures this whole journey. I walked to my studio. My proper studio now. Not just a corner of the garage. Half-finished canvases lined the walls, each telling part of our story. I might have something, I said slowly, pulling out a canvas I'd been working on secretly. It's not quite finished, but they gathered around as I unveiled it. The painting showed a family, their figures initially scattered and shadowed, gradually coming together in increasingly bright light. In the foreground, a young woman held both a paintbrush and a key. Is that us? Dad asked softly. It's called redemption, I said, because that's what this was really about. Not revenge. Not really. It's perfect, Rowan declared. But maybe add some texture in this corner? Like you taught me about creating depth? I laughed. Look who's becoming the expert. Well, I did learn from the best. He checked his watch. I better get to that presentation. Those high school kids need to know that art isn't just a hobby. It can save your family and your soul. After he left, Mom finished her calculations. Even with the accelerated timeline, we're still under budget. I've been putting aside a percentage of every sale for emergencies. My responsible mother, I said, squeezing her shoulder. Who would have thought? Who would have thought any of this? Dad gestured around the room, at the art, the planning notebooks, the family photos now mixed with gallery invitations and positive bank statements. Gia raised her coffee cup. To the power of revenge gone right. To family, I corrected, picking up my paintbrush. Now, who wants to help me finish this piece? Dad, I need one of your special finish frames. Mom, can you calculate the optimal pricing? Rowan can practice his explanation when he gets back. And what should I do? Jonah asked. I handed him a brush. You believed in my art from the beginning. Help me show them how it all comes together. As my family gathered around the canvas, each contributing their newfound skills and understanding, I realized something profound. The revenge I'd planned had transformed into something far more powerful than punishment. It had become a restoration of our home, our relationships, our dignity. You know, Mom said, watching me add final touches to the painting, I used to think you were wasting your talent. Now I realize you were just waiting for the right moment to show us its true worth. Worth isn't just about money, I replied, thinking of the triptych we'd refused to sell. No, Dad agreed. Sometimes it's about what you build together. Through the window, I could see Rowan returning, gesturing excitedly as he talked to a student who'd followed him home. Probably another art convert. I added one final brushstroke to redemption, a small light, breaking through the shadows, showing the way forward. There, I said. Now it's complete. Just like us.
Hey, I'm Ellen. Just crossed 45 and I line up the numbers for a living, crunching them from my home workspace, a perk my husband, Jake, is all in for. It's an arrangement that's got the thumbs up from my folks too, since they're the brains behind a sports store which Jake's been running. Jake took charge of the family business a bit after we got hitched. He was the life of the place, and now at 45, I'm still at home doing the books while he's the main guy at the shop. We got on like a house on fire in the beginning. I was 37 when we clicked, kind of late-ish, but he was worth it. Making everyone laugh was his thing, and my parents liked him straight away. Didn't matter to us, we didn't have kids. He was cool with it, really cool. Life was sweet. We ate together, shared house jobs, the works. But as the years ticked by, things kind of soured. He'd come home only when the streets were empty, and I'd be alone cleaning and making sure everything was right at home. When I'd ask for a bit of help, he'd just say, "That's all on you." And then the whole world tilted off its axis with a stupid ping from Jake's phone. It was a mess up on his part, leaving his phone behind like that. I heard the noise while I was in the middle of something and thought it was weird. His phone lit up with messages that made my heart stop. It was like being punched in the gut, seeing words that shouldn't be there. No beating around the bush, the messages were spicy, the kind that you don't send to someone's husband. But I didn't have much, just a few messages that could mean anything. When the man came out of the shower looking for his phone, I was cool. "You forgot this," I said and slid the phone over. His hand snatched it up quick. "Thanks," he mumbled, and before diving into his inbox, he asked, "Anything interesting happen while I was gone?" I considered for a quick second whether to throw it all in his face, make a big scene. But I had zilch. No concrete proof, just a gut feeling and some ambiguous texts. So I shrugged. Same old. He nodded and dived into whatever it was that needed his urgent attention. "Always a crisis somewhere," he muttered. And just like that, I was undercover. I needed to be sure before I blew up our whole life over what might be nothing. I'd play dumb, keep quiet, watch, and wait. I didn't let on a thing as he finished breakfast, kissed my cheek, and walked out the door. That was the morning I figured I had more to figure out. I had started a silent countdown to either blowing up my marriage or calling it all a bad dream. Only time would tell which. Nerves were my breakfast that morning, my hands jittery like I'd downed the entire pot of joe. I rang up the detective agency, the one that supposedly knows how to untangle the webs of lies without breaking a sweat. Acting the part of a clueless spouse, honestly, it should earn me an Academy Award. I plastered on the happy wife face, served up Jake's beloved medium-rare ribeyes, and tossed in some buttered peas for good measure, acting as if the world hadn't just tipped on its axis. Jake, well, he was his usual self, cracking tired jokes across the breakfast table, clueless that I was onto him, or was he? Sometimes the way he'd glance up from his phone, his eyes narrow like he smelled something fishy, made me wonder if he was wise to the game. I had to be slick, couldn't let the facade slip. Later, I slid into the car, the engine purring to life, just as my inner turmoil was. The meeting spot for this so-called detective? A coffee shop that was the epitome of nondescript, tucked between a laundromat and some hole-in-the-wall store selling knickknacks and paddywhacks. Frank was no run-off-the-mill gumshoe. Toughness clung to him, the kind that's seen enough shady corners to know what lurks in the shadows. He had a handshake that suggested I could break you, but I'll wait. "So, what's tipping you off to foul play?" Frank's voice didn't just ask the question, it demanded the truth. "It's like intuition dialed up to 11, I responded, trying not to let slip that I was nearly coming undone beneath my calm veneer. "He's secretive, dodgy, coming home when he knows I'll be zonked out, and then there's the texts." Frank's eyes didn't miss the tremor in my hands as I showed him the snapshots of Jake's texts. He scrolled through them in silence, his jaw tightening just a hair with every swipe. "We'll see who your husband's been texting. Check his habits, his lies, he won't know what hit him," he said, the last part with a shadow of a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The price tag was a punch to the gut, but I was in too deep to back out now. "Let's do it," I said, even as my inner accountant screamed. Home was a minefield now, each step choreographed so Jake wouldn't suspect a thing. But the weight of the secrets turned every "I love you" into quicksand. Jake settled on the couch, the blue TV glow casting ghostly shadows. "You've been off. Everything okay?" His concern sounded almost genuine. "Yeah, just a hard day is all." I played it off, cringing inwardly at the deceit caking my words. He grunted, half listening, thumbing his phone like it was wired to his survival. "If you say so." The bedroom was my escape, but sleep was a joke. As I laid in the dark, waiting for the eventual weight of him on the other side of the bed, each creak of the house was a whisper of what might come to pass. The skies were a nasty shade of gray, and my phone wouldn't stop going off with warnings. "Tornadoes coming, Ellen," they said, and you could feel it in your bones it was true. Jake was all business, pulling stuff from the shelves like a man with a plan. "Basement. Now," he said, without looking up. "I'm grabbing supplies. You, get the weather radio from the barn." Didn't sound like a suggestion. It was getting ugly outside real quick, with the wind getting pushy. I bundled up and dashed out to the barn. The clouds were low, and I wondered if they were trying to tell me something. The barn was a black hole. I felt around for the light but gave up quick. I knew where the radio was, or I thought I did. Then, like a bad joke, the door slammed shut behind me. "Damn," I said out loud, hoping it might make me feel better. It didn't. "Jake." No answer, just the wind being a bully to everything in its path. I pushed at the door, but it was like pushing against a brick wall. "What the heck?" I muttered, and then it hit me like a slap. This was no accident. The door had been shut tight from the outside. "Jake? This ain't funny," I said, louder this time, but the wind stole my words. I banged on the wood so hard my hands hurt, but the door didn't budge. Then I got it. This was Jake's doing. "Why?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone who could hear. A bad taste settled in my mouth. I kicked at the door, not because I thought it'd open, but because it felt better than doing nothing. "Hey!" I shouted. Nothing. Just the sound of hell's bells ringing outside as the tornado chewed up everything in its path. I should have been scared for my life, I guess. But it was the betrayal that stung me fierce. You expect the weather to turn sour, but you don't expect it from your husband. "I'm stuck in here, Jake," I screamed at the door. But Jake, well, he wasn't there to hear. In the pitch black, I stumbled around, feeling dumb and lost. A radio that might save my skin was useless if I couldn't tell the world I was trapped. Minutes piled on top of each other. I felt each one. The barn was an old beast, groaning in the wind, and I thought about that tornado touching down, about how this barn would probably go first. I'd never been one to panic, but that tornado was stealing my nerve. With each boom and shake, my heart raced like a jackrabbit. This was it, then. Locked in a dark barn by the man who'd promised to always protect me, with a monster storm on the way. My heart was beating so damn loud, I could barely hear the roar of the wind picking up outside. I was banging on the barn door until my hands felt like they were on fire. Then his voice cut through the noise like a cold streak. "I'm sorry, Ellen, but this is for the best. You'll be gone, and I'll be free," Jake stated, plain as day. "Free?" My voice was shaky, raw from all the screaming. "What the hell is that supposed to mean, Jake?" There was a pause. I could imagine him out there, deciding how much to tell me. "It means I'm leaving. With her. And the money. The money we'd both worked our guts out for. The money that was supposed to be for our future." "With her," I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "Yeah, with her. You know, the cute teller from the bank? Turns out she's got a thing for guys with a little cash." I kept pounding on the door, but I could feel the fight going out of me. "And you're just gonna leave me here? For a tornado to, what? You think it's gonna just sweep me away, and you'll tell everyone it was some tragic accident?" Sounds about right, he said, without a trace of the man I thought I knew. You can't. You just can't. I was hollering now, my throat raw. Jake's voice was fading as if he was backing away. Oh, I can, Ellen. And I am. Take care now. And just like that, the footsteps were gone. I fell silent for a moment, my breath coming in hard gasps. Then I started to scream. Help! Somebody, please! I wasn't ready to give up, not by a long shot. Please! I'm in here. The barn felt like it was closing in on me, the darkness so thick I could hardly breathe. My hands hurt too much for any more banging, so I just kept on screaming. Help! Between each shout, I listened hard. Prayed for the sound of a vehicle, the distant shout of a neighbor, anything. But there was nothing over the rage of the storm. I thought back to every conversation, every look that should have told me Jake was this kind of scum. How did I not see it? But beating myself up wasn't gonna get me out of this. I needed to stay alive long enough to sort out that mess. Anybody? I yelled over the wind. Can anyone hear me? I kept hollering, my voice cracking and breaking, until I couldn't scream anymore. I sagged against the splintered door, the ache in my body nothing compared to the raw scream of betrayal. Help! Hey, anybody! I bellowed again, the words tearing at my throat, raw and angry. I was Ellen. I'd been through storms before. Not like this, sure, not locked in a barn by the man I married, wishing a tornado on me. But I'd been through tough times. And I wasn't about to quit. Not now. Help me. I'm in here. I kept on screaming, even as the world outside screamed back at me. I was yelling my lungs out, voice all scratchy, when suddenly, I heard a click. The barn door creaked on its hinges, and there stood Mr. Donnelly with his dog, going nuts at his feet. What in the hot hell are you doing hollerin' in here, Ellen? Thought the wind yanked your brains out. He grabbed my arm, none too gently, and yanked me out of the barn. I was stumbling over my own feet trying to keep up with his brisk pace. His dog, a big old black lab, was jumping around, barking like it was all a game. We gotta get you to my place, now. Mr. Donnelly shouted over the sound of the howling wind. He was serious, more serious than I'd ever seen him. We pelted down the road, the wind trying to slap us sideways. By the time we burst into Mr. Donnelly's house, my heart was doing somersaults, and my breath was coming fast and harsh. He shoved me down the stairs, before I even had time to thank him. The basement was dim, lit by a couple of bare bulbs. It smelled like damp and old newspapers. We could hear the storm pounding on the house above, but down here, it felt like another world. Coffee? Donnelly offered, and I just nodded, still trying to wrap my head around everything. While the coffee was brewing, he sat across from me, arms crossed, the dog settled at his feet. All right, Ellen. Spill it. What's got you locked up in a barn with a twister on your tail? I took a deep breath, the warm smell of coffee filling the air. Jake, I started, the name like a lead weight in my mouth. He's locked me up to get taken by the storm. Mr. Donnelly stared, his eyes hard as flints. Son of a, and here I thought he was just the usual kind of fool. Yeah, a fool, I muttered, feeling my hands ball into fists. Got a plan for every dime, just not for me. Saying it out loud, it sounded even worse. Donnelly handed me a mug, the heat from the coffee seeping into my cold fingers. Well, hell, he picked the wrong woman to mess with. His lips twitched into what might have been a smile on a good day. Outside, the storm was still tearing at the world, but inside, sipping on Mr. Donnelly's coffee, I felt something like peace. Or maybe it was just the eye of the storm. S'pose I've got some planning to do, I said, my voice steadier now. Donnelly nodded. Start with resting. You look like you've been chewed up and spat out by a coyote. Feel like it, too, I said with a weak chuckle. That's how I found myself in old man Donnelly's basement, with the storm overhead. But my own storm was just getting started. And when it hit, it wouldn't be nature's fury, it'd be mine. As I stepped out of Mr. Donnelly's basement with him right beside me, what hit me first wasn't the sight but the silence, the eerie kind that follows a big ruckus. It was like the world was holding its breath. Where the barn used to be, there was nothing but a jumble of wood scraps, broken tree limbs, and scattered stones. Looked like someone had thrown a tantrum and tore the place apart. Mom and Dad were right there, next to that mess. They were crying hard, so caught up in their grief they didn't notice us at first. They must have thought I was gone, buried under that pile. I could see Dad's shoulders shaking, and Mom, she was just crumpled. Then there was Jake, my so-called better half, standing off to the side. The look on his face when he saw me, it was like he'd seen a ghost. He went so pale I thought he might keel over right then and there. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled, needing to pull them out of it. They spun around like they couldn't believe their eyes. Mom was on me in a flash, her arms so tight around me I could hardly breathe. "We thought," she tried to say, but couldn't finish. "You thought wrong," I told her, pulling back to look at Jake. With everyone watching, I said it straight. "This one," I tipped my head towards Jake, "locked me up in that barn. Figured I'd be history after the storm hit." The words hit like punches. Dad's face went from heartbreak to anger so fast I swear I could see the change. "What?" he said, real low and dangerous, turning to Jake. Jake tried to find the right lie, I could see it. "Now, listen." "Not a word," Dad cut him like a knife. "No room for talking now. Your lies are worth less than spit." Mom was looking at me, then at Jake, putting it together. "You did this?" The hurt was raw in her voice. "And I would have died in there if it wasn't for Mr. Donnelly," I said, thumbing towards him. Mr. Donnelly just gave a nod, like it wasn't a big deal, but we all knew different. Jake backed up a step, maybe thinking he could fade away. "Ellen, You what?" My turn to cut him off. "Hope I'd be scrapwood like the barn?" Neighbors started crowding around, picking up on the drama and the disaster, making a circle around us. I could hear them muttering, shooting looks at Jake that could scald. Someone said, "Is that true, Jake?" And all he could do was stand there, mouth working with nothing coming out. Dad stepped forward, and for a sec I thought he might just deck him. "You get gone." He pointed towards the road. "Don't want to see your face round here again." Jake took the hint and started walking, not saying another word, leaving a quiet that shouted in his wake. The neighbors, they were all buzzing and clucking, saying how they'd help us pick up the pieces, literally, and all that. It was good people doing good people things. But right then, it all just washed over me like rain off a duck's back. Mom and Dad stayed close, like they couldn't quite believe I was real and standing there. They kept touching my arm, my back, just little pats, the kind that said 1,000 things. My phone decided right then to chime in. I pulled it out and there they were, pictures that painted 1,000 foul words. Jake and some woman, all smiles, living it up. In one, they were cheersing with drinks more expensive than the new roof we'd needed. My heart kicked hard against my ribs, anger rising hot and fast in my throat. I tossed the phone to Dad, not even wanting another look. The pictures made their rounds among the neighbors faster than a rumor. Skiing and gasps added a soundtrack to the unfolding drama. "Is that, with our money?" Dad's hands were shaking, but there was nothing weak in his voice. "Looks like trust ain't all I invested in him," I said. Anger made my words come out cool and distant, like I was talking about someone else's life going up in smoke. Next to me, Mr. Donnelly spat on the ground, a well-worn sign of disgust. "Always knew the boy's smile was too slick," he muttered. Dad looked like he was calculating how much that smile had cost us in cold hard cash. "We'll be going to the lawyer first thing tomorrow," he declared. "He won't get away with this." The neighbors nodded, murmuring agreement. It was comforting, in its own way, to have folks at your back when the world turned inside out. "Tomorrow?" My mom seemed to snap then. "He will answer for his sins now." I understood that feeling boiling up inside her, but I knew if we were to wring this out for what it was worth, we'd need the law on our side. "We'll get him, Mom. We'll get every cent back." It was a promise I intended to keep if it was the last thing I did. We spent a few minutes going back and forth about what to do next, but it was mostly just to keep our hands busy while our minds raced. What to fix first, what to sell, how to get back on our feet. "I guess this is what they call a fresh start," I said, trying to find a silver lining. Dad let out a puff of a laugh. "Fresh start, yeah. We'll clean this up. We always do." Underneath the turmoil, I could feel something new taking root. Maybe it was determination or just plain stubbornness. Either way, it felt good, like the first step on a long road to something better. As the twilight shadows stretched over us, the flicker of flashlights and murmurs of our neighbors helping to clean up became the evening's choir. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I looked around at the people gathered, ready to help us rebuild, and felt a surge of gratitude. This was bad, but with folks like these, we'd manage. The clang of the courthouse door echoed in my ears as I stepped into the hallway, the sound of finality. My shoulders, which seemed to have been near my ears for months, finally relaxed. Outside, the sun was fighting through the gray clouds, and it felt right, like the universe was agreeing with the judge. "I could get used to this," I mumbled, half to myself, half to the world. Mom, who hadn't let go of my hand since we walked in, gave it a squeeze. "To justice?" "Me too, Ellen." Dad was a few steps ahead, talking to Mr. Donnelly. They were patting each other's backs, almost too rough, but that was just how they showed relief, I suppose. The police had done their job, taken Mr. Donnelly's statement, all the shady emails, and the photos off my phone as evidence. They moved faster than I thought they would, or could. Even Jake couldn't squirm his way out of this one. "Ya hear what that lawyer said just now?" Dad was almost grinning as he caught up to us. Even his fancy suit couldn't help Jake snake his way out. Mom snorted. "Yeah, and did you see Jake's face when the judge handed down the sentence? Like he swallowed a bug. Good riddance." We stopped outside, the cold air feeling sharp, but I welcomed it. It was bracing, full of a new beginning. "I just want to thank you guys." I looked at Mr. Donnelly, "for believing in me." He waved me off. "No thanks needed. Justice had its day, finally." Dad nodded. "We're a family. A unit. Ain't nothing that's gonna break that, you hear?" "I hear you, Dad. Loud and clear," I replied. As we walked towards the car, there was this tight feeling in my chest. Not from sadness or fear, but something else, relief, maybe. It was hard to put a name on it. "Divorce papers are in," I said, more to the world than anyone in particular. "And the business is clean of him." "Now that," Dad said as he keyed the engine alive, "is music to my ears. And we can finally get that new roof, huh?" Mom's attempt at a joke made all of us laugh, a real, genuine laugh. The engine hummed softly as we began the drive home, the route familiar, yet it felt different somehow. At a red light, I looked out the window at folks just going about their day, oblivious to the small victory in our car. It wasn't a shout it from the rooftops kind of victory, but it was ours. As we turned onto the main street that led back to our home, the fields on either side lay fallow, but it wouldn't be long until they were green again, alive and full of potential. Life had a way of pushing through, of continuing against all odds. And so would I. With Jake out of the picture and justice served in the courtroom, it was like the world had given me permission to start over. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared, but there was excitement there too. And as we drove on, the sun broke fully through the clouds, bathing the car in a warm light, and I knew that somehow, everything was going to be all right. "Eliza, you gotta keep it on the down low, babe," Brian said with those puppy dog eyes drilling into me. "Let's just say you're a sales clerk or something chill like that, yeah?" I could tell he was serious, but still, the request rang strange in my ears. "A clerk? Brian, you've seen my business degree framed on the wall, right?" "Totally," he chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "But my mom's, she's special, you know? Don't want her making a fuss or something. I raised an eyebrow, but nodded. All right, for you, I'll be the world's best sales clerk, I said with a laugh, not realizing then that fabricating this tiny piece of my reality for his parents would unfold into something ugly and hard to handle. Soon enough, we rolled up to his folks' place. It was your typical suburbia, well, if every house looked like it could be on the cover of a homestyle mag, that is. Brian rang the bell, giving my hand a quick squeeze before the door swung open. And there she was, Linda, all coiffed hair and a smile that was a little too, let's just say she wouldn't have been out of place as a game show host. Well, look at you, she appraised as she ushered us in. Brian says you're in retail? I plastered on my best customer service smile. Yeah, just selling clothes in a shop downtown, I said casually. Retail, huh? Linda eyed me up and down, her smile barely flinching, like she's heard better jokes at a funeral. I supposed you didn't feel like aiming higher? Brian shot me a play-along glance. Nah, she loves it, he jumped in quickly. She loves it, Linda echoed, as if tasting the words. Right. Then she floated away, leaving a silence that felt like standing in a room after someone's just slammed a door. Later, when Linda went to powder her nose or count her coins or whatever, Brian found me in their living room, which was too clean, like no one really lived there. He had this I ate something bad look as he spilled the family tea. He told me all about Linda's thing for the slot machines, the way she borrows money faster than a bank can print it. She'd bled his dad dry and was always circling Brian for a handout like it was a national sport. We talking a little gambling fun or full-on Vegas blowout? I asked him, trying to sort the scale of what we were dealing with. He grimaced. Professional league. She's up to her eyeballs in it. If there's a machine with blinking lights, she's there, batting her eyelashes at it. The wedding, if you could even call it that, was as low frills as a diner breakfast. We figured why blow cash on just one day when we're aiming for a lifetime. Not that I had any illusions about Linda seeing eye to eye with me on that. In our backyard, dressed up but not overdone, Brian looked nervous but happy. I kept things as chill as I could, in jeans and a nice blouse, because why not? Linda, on the other hand, turned up looking like she just lost a bet, wearing a dress that screamed I would rather be anywhere but here. The rest of the shindig passed without much drama. Friends joked, the grill sizzled, and life felt almost normal for a hot second. Aunt Marcy was on music, hooking up an old boombox that squealed before it sang. Our first dance was to a song that skipped a few times, but Brian and I just laughed it off and kept on dancing. It wasn't until everyone had had their fill of burgers and cake that the real fun began. Linda dug in true Linda fashion, not on food, but us, again. She found me, her eyes a little glassy from the party favors. You know, Eliza, marrying into this family means you're part of the clan now. I nodded, that's usually how it goes. And clans stick together. You never know when one of us might be in a bind. That's what families do. Help each other. The not-so-subtle hint in her voice was thicker than the icing on our cheap but tasty cake. I caught on quick. Sure, families help, but we also just made it clear we're saving up for other stuff, remember? Her smile was a thin line. Just saying, a penny saved today might be a penny needed tomorrow. By any one of us. Brian swung by then, slinging an arm around me. And any penny we save is staying with us, for our future, isn't that right, babe? Nailed it, I said, high-fiving him. With arms linked, we wandered off, leaving Linda to stew in the middle of a party that was everything she didn't want. She didn't dance after that, instead sat like a queen in exile, sipping and watching, but thankfully keeping her money thoughts to herself. It was maybe 2 weeks into this whole married gig when Linda turned our twosome into a crowd. Without fail, every payday, she'd be waiting outside the office where Brian worked, hanging around like a bad habit. One of those afternoons, I swing by to take Brian out for lunch. And there she is, leaning on the hood of her car, tapping her foot like she's on stage keeping time for a rock band. We hadn't even made it back to our car when she met us halfway, her voice rising above the sounds of the city like a siren. "There you are. I've been waiting half an hour, Brian. We need to talk." Brian's usually the calm type, but I saw that jaw clench. "Mom, not now. I'm on break, and we've got plans." She wasn't one to be sidelined though. "This is more important than your plans. I've got bills to pay, and since we're family now." I had to jump in, couldn't help it. "Hold up, Linda. We talked about this. We're not your personal ATM." Her gaze snapped to me, sharp as a tack. "Listen, girl, you married into this. You've got a duty now." Brian stepped between us, trying to keep the peace. "Mom, you've gotta stop doing this. It's not fair to us, or you. There's people that can help with." Linda's laugh cut him off, low and mean. "Help? I don't need help, I need money. And my son's not gonna leave his mother out to dry." "People are staring, Linda. This ain't the place," I said, my voice steady but firm, wishing I could just pull Brian away. But Linda was on a roll. "Fine. I'll be by the house later, and we can sort this out. Don't make me wait, Brian," she warned, poking him hard in the chest, before she turned on her heel and strutted off. At the sandwich shop, we grabbed a corner booth and tried to shake off the Linda encounter. Brian was rubbing his temples, looking like he could use something stronger than a soda. I reached over, my fingers bumping his. "Babe, maybe it's time to cut the cord. She's walking all over us." He sighed, heavy and long, like he was deflating. I know. It's just not easy, Eliza. She's always been this way." The rest of lunch was us making plans, figuring out how to tackle the Linda issue without a blowout. By the time we got back to work, we had the makings of a game plan, or at least the start of one. That evening, as predicted, Linda was banging on our front door like it owed her money. When we let her in, she wasted no time. "I don't have all night," she snapped, dropping her purse on our kitchen table like she owned the place. "Mom, we can't keep doing this," Brian started, but she bulldozed right over him. "Can't or won't," she challenged, eyeing me as if I was holding the strings to Brian's wallet. "It's not healthy, for any of us," I came back at her, trying to keep my cool. She squared her shoulders, ready for a fight. "Healthy? What's healthy is a roof over my head and food on my plate. And we've been helping with that," Brian said, a bit of steel finally in his voice. "But this is it, the last time. We're saving up, you know that." Linda's eyes narrowed, and she let out a hiss of disbelief. "The last time, huh? Don't make promises you can't keep, boy." "Enough," Brian snapped, surprising us both. "You get help, Mom, or this is it." We didn't give her the money that night. It felt like a victory, small but mighty. Linda left in a huff, the door slamming behind her like the finale of a thunderstorm. Brian's phone buzzed off the table just as we were getting ready to call it a night. It was the kind of call that drains the color from your face. Tom, Brian's dad and Linda's husband, had landed himself in the hospital. His heart had decided to pull a fast one on him. "Jesus," Brian cursed under his breath, fumbling with his keys. We bolted out the door before the echo of our slamming door had time to fade. The harsh lights of the hospital were a stark change to our dim cozy living room. I could see Brian's chest heaving as we made our way to the front desk. The lady there pointed us to the right wing with a bored expression like she'd seen it all before. We found Tom in the ICU, hooked up to more beeps and blips than a video game arcade. Seeing him like that, all wires and tubes, it got to Brian. I saw his eyes water, his hands shake. "Dad," he choked out, gripping the railing of the hospital bed. Tom's eyes were closed, but they fluttered like he heard us. I put a hand on Brian's back, no words, because what could I say? It's then, watching the rise and fall of Tom's chest, that Brian turns to me, his voice a low tremble. Where's Mom? Good question. I pull out my phone and gave Linda a call. No answer. So I tried again. And again. When she finally picked up, the noise in the background wasn't the beep of hospital machines, it was the clatter of a slot machine. Linda? I said, my voice almost as brittle as the hospital sheets. Tom's had a heart attack. We're at the hospital. There's a pause, a cash register's ring, cutting through. Yeah? And you should be here. Brian grabbed the phone from me, nearly shouting. Your husband's lying in a damn hospital bed. She sighed like we were discussing the weather. Tell him I'll pop by in the morning. I'm busy right now, cashing in some stuff. I could see the muscles in Brian's jaw jump. He threw the phone back at me, storming off to find a doctor or maybe just to punch a wall where no one could see. That night and into the morning, Tom got a bit better, but Linda never showed. The doc said it was a warning sign, that he could have another attack if he didn't slow down. We went home exhausted, the morning sun stinging our eyes. Walking in, it was like a burglary, only Linda wasn't taking TVs or jewelry. No, she was packing up Tom's vinyl collection, the one thing he loved more than anything. What the hell are you doing, Mom? Brian stormed into the room, looking like he was ready to explode. These are worth something. She snapped without looking up. Don't worry, Tom won't miss them. Besides, hospital bills, remember? Hospital bills? Brian was fuming. That's rich, coming from you. You didn't even go see him. She rolled her eyes, stopped packing for a split second to stare Brian down. Look, your father's tough, he'll be fine. But these bills ain't gonna pay themselves. But Brian was having none of it. Put them back, Mom. Now. He moved towards her, his hands balled into fists. Linda stared him down, met his anger with a sneer. Make me. I stepped between them. Enough, I said, my voice steady. Just stop. Dad needs us to be a family right now. The tension could have been cut with a knife. Linda looked from me to Brian, shrugged, and tossed the record she was holding back into the box. What she said next was like a punch to the gut. Family sticks together, right? But when it's convenient for you too, huh? She left without another word, the sound of the door closing behind her was the only goodbye. I looked at Brian, at the mess in the room. She doesn't get it, I whispered. She really doesn't get it. He didn't have an answer. We cleaned up in silence, Tom's records settling back onto their shelves like old friends coming home. The news hit us like a rogue wave. Tom was gone, just like that. The world had the nerve to keep spinning, the sun to keep rising and setting, as if nothing had shifted beneath our feet. Brian was numb, you could see it in the way he moved, like somebody had filled his shoes with lead. We did what people do in these times. Made calls, arranged for a funeral, picked a casket, a dark, polished thing that seemed too grand for Tom, who'd never cared for flash. The house was a mess of flowers and sympathy cards, the air thick with the smell of lilies and the sound of muttered condolences. Linda was nowhere. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air, her presence erased from our immediate reality. People asked about her, of course. Families always hit the hardest, they'd say, nodding like that explained everything. Days passed, and she was still MIA. Brian had stopped asking after her. Stopped wanting to hear her excuses or lies. Then, the funeral. I expected her to be there at least, to show her face, say her goodbyes. But she was a no-show. Hollow, was all Brian said, looking at the empty seat next to him reserved for his mom, the word echoing in the quiet of the chapel. The service came and went. Linda's absence was the elephant in the room, a constant undercurrent to every conversation. A mother should be there, crying, holding on to memories of better days, not this. It was maybe a week after, I ran into Linda at the grocery store. If you could call it running into her. She was at the end of an aisle, dressed to the nines, a grin on her face like she'd won the lottery. Look at you, I greeted, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She swiveled around, that grin never fading. Well, if it isn't the grieving widow. Lighten up, will ya? It's not the end of the world. My fists clenched at my sides, but I stood my ground. You didn't even come to the funeral, Linda. How could you? She shrugged, her jewelry clinking with the motion. What's the point? Sobbing over a hole in the ground? That's not for me. Besides, Tom left a tidy sum. I'm rich at last. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the dirty glares from other shoppers. How can you be so cold? Brian's a big boy. He'll get over it. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Everyone does. That man loved you till his last breath, I shot back, my voice shaking now. Linda just laughed. Love, love. In the end, it's money that keeps you warm at night. I could feel people watching, feel the scene we were making. It took everything in me not to scream at her. So, I turned on my heel and walked away, the sound of her cackles following me like a bad taste in my mouth. As the automatic doors closed behind me, shutting out the noise, I gripped the handle of my cart so tight my knuckles turned white. I had to remind myself, Tom's memory deserved better than this, better than her. The sun was barely up, and there was a wild knocking at the door that could wake the dead. I was sipping my first coffee of the day when Brian's mom, Linda, came crashing into the kitchen like a whirlwind in a thrift store dress. Her hair was every which way, and her eyes were wild. Everything's gone, she hollered right off the bat, like we were in the middle of a fight we didn't know we had. Tom left me with nothing but a pile of debts. Brian, who'd been halfway through a bowl of cereal, dropped his spoon and it clattered loudly. What the hell, Mom? No money, no nothing. Just bills and more bills. Linda was waving her arms now, papers flying from her hands like panicked birds. It would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. Then she fixed her eyes on Brian like he was some ATM. You gotta give me your dad's watch and that fancy ring he had. They're worth a fortune. Brian's face went rock hard. Dad's buried with his watch and ring, Mom. You know that. He wanted it that way. That stopped her, for a microsecond. Well, dig him up then. The words came out of her mouth so fast you'd think she'd said, please, and thank you, and by your leave. Nah, ain't happening. Brian shook his head, leaning back in his chair as if he needed the distance. They're staying with Dad. End of story. Linda looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whipped around with her coat flapping behind her like dark wings. She was out the door before we could say another word. It wasn't even light out yet when the knock came. I knew it wasn't good. Cops don't do house calls at the crack of dawn to share a cup of joe. I was barely awake, struggling to make sense of the two uniforms and serious badges at my door. Brian stood behind me, boxers and bedhead, rubbing his eyes like he could wipe away this bad dream. Brian and, sorry, ma'am, your name? The taller one asked. I'm Eliza, I managed, my voice gravelly with sleep. You folks know a Linda Harrison? The cop had that cop look, not quite suspicious, not quite sorry. Brian nodded, shoved his hands in his hair. Yeah, my mom. What's she done this time? She's been arrested, the officer said, and his partner handed us a slip of paper. Caught trying to dig up her late husband's grave. Brian cussed under his breath, a stream of words that would make a sailor blush. I'll put some pants on, he grumbled. We were down at the station faster than I'd like, the kind of place you never want to be. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the coffee from a machine too weak. Linda was sitting there, her pride fighting with the dirt on her clothes. The sight would have been comical if it weren't so damn sad. What the hell, Mom? Brian threw his hands up as we approached the bars. Don't you what the hell me, Brian, Linda shot back, fire in her eyes. I did what I had to do. You tried to rob Dad's grave, Mom. Brian's voice was a tight wire about to snap. That watch would have paid off everything. She hissed back, gripping the cell bars like they were the only thing holding her upright. And what? You didn't think about us, huh? Brian towered over her, all muscle and anger. I put a hand on his arm, could feel the coiled tension like a live wire. Let's talk this out. There's nothing to talk out. Linda spat. I don't expect you two to understand. Not until you hit rock bottom, too. Linda, this ain't rock bottom. This is digging a hole straight to hell, I said, my own anger flaring. The ride home was silent. We knew the day would come when we'd hear from Linda again. That's the thing with debt, it's like a zombie. You think it's dead, but it can come back with a vengeance. But for now, we'd leave the dead to their sleep and the living to their mistakes. We had a life to live, and no amount of digging would change our course. There was no going back after what she did. Brian tossed our old phones into a donation bin the next town over, and I watched the numbers light up like unwanted stars before going dark for good. We didn't owe anyone an explanation, least of all her. As the city limits faded in the rearview, our new future was a cozy apartment in a nameless neighborhood, where the nosy next-door neighbor couldn't pick her out of a lineup, much less us. It was a good setup, neat and clean, with just the right amount of space for two people looking to dodge the ghost of family drama. We unpacked our lives, minus the baggage of anyone else's mistakes. Brian hammered together discount bookshelves with the sort of focus you might mistake for anger if you didn't know him. But that was just Brian being Brian, all in or nothing. I'm not thinking about her, you know, he said over the squeal of a stubborn screw. I nodded from where I sorted our collection of DVDs, comedy stacked separate from the action, a place for everything. I know. We didn't talk about her after that. We didn't need to. Weeks spun out and the city we left might have been another planet for all the market left. But small talk has a way of traveling, and it wasn't long before a text from an old neighbor found its way to us through the blurry social network of people we used to know. She'd gotten off with a suspended sentence and a wad of fines instead of jail time, now spending her days scanning groceries and chipping away at her mountain of debt. We heard she's living in a place with cracks in the walls and plumbing from the dark ages, but if she was looking for sympathy, she wouldn't find any here. Brian read the text over my shoulder and huffed out a laugh that almost sounded like relief. Guess she's getting by, then, was all he said before going back to his new video game, thumbs tap dancing over the controller like it was just another day. And really, it was no more drama, just us and our quiet life. Gets what she deserves, I muttered, deleting the text and blocking the number. No loose ends. Yeah. Brian agreed, pausing his game to look at me. But that's her circus, not ours. We knew that somewhere out there she was still picking up the pieces, but we were too busy building something new to care. Sometimes people break things too badly to put them back together, and that's just the way of it. Our world was small but full, weekly movie nights and lazy Sundays, bills paid on time and no calls in the night to shake us from our sleep. Think she'll try to find us? I asked once, the closest I came to asking what if. Brian's eyes met mine, steady and sure. Let her try. So we just kept living, quiet and low, like two survivors after the storm had passed. No looking back, no echoes of the past, just forward to the next day and the day after that. You know, up until a bit ago, I was Alice. Just Alice. Now, I'm that Alice, the one folks whisper about when they think I can't hear him. My friends, they don't know the half of it. The ones I work with at the hospital, they see the bruises under my eyes, but not the ones wrapped around my self-esteem. They don't know how my scrubs hide more than they show. Girl, you okay? Sarah, who's been with me since nursing school, asks as we change into our scrubs. Gotta love her for trying. Yeah, I'm good, I say, but we both know it's a lie. Just didn't sleep much, is all. Sarah tugs at the sleeve of my once bright scrub top, now a dull shade I can't even name. Didn't you used to wear that electric blue one? You were all about those bright colors. Ain't seen that in a minute. Guess I just go with what's clean these days, I shrug, avoiding her eyes. Clean or not, this ain't you. What did that man do to your closet, girl? Suck the life out of it just like he's been sucking the life out of you? There's an edge to Sarah's voice now. It's got a bite that says she's not just asking out of curiosity. You talk too much, you know that? I fire back, trying to keep it light. But Sarah ain't having any of it. And you don't talk enough. Spill it, Alice. Just then, another nurse, Betty, who's been eavesdropping, snips in from across the room. Oh, leave her alone, Sarah. Everyone sees she's down since the big day. Pretty damn clear something's going on. Icy silence clamps down on me like a vice. They're all waiting for me to say something, but what do I tell them? That the man of my dreams turned out to be the con artist of my nightmares? How Tom's swipe at my confidence is more regular than our meals together. Marriage, huh? More like a wrestling match where I lost before I even got in the ring. Not everyone needs to air their dirty laundry for the world to see, Betty. Sarah snipes back, her loyalty warming me a fraction. I sneak a glance at her. Really, it's nothing, okay? He's stressed with work and all. Stressed, my. She scoffs under her breath, but drops it for my sake. The rest of the shift I can feel their eyes on me, a mix of pity and concern. It's like I've become the lead in some bleak show where I didn't even audition. The day drags on and I lose myself in the comfort of routine, checking charts, handing out meds, comforting those worse off than me. At least at work, I can pretend I'm who I used to be. Clocking out feels like I'm walking the plank. The drive home is short, the dread long. Tom's car is in the drive when I pull up. My stomach's doing gymnastics, hoping today's a good day. But when I open the door, the air's thick with silence, worse than shouting. He's at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. His eyes flick up to me, and there ain't any welcome there. You're late, is his curt greeting. Traffic, I mumble, dropping my bag, the weight, not just from the contents. He grunts, dinner? Sure, gimme a minute to change. I stumble over the words, eager to get out of my scrubs and into something less, me. In the bedroom, I swap my work greens for the gray sweater that seems to have become part of my skin. I catch my reflection in the mirror. Sarah's right. The colors, hell, they're gone, and not just from my closet. It's like I've faded to some dull version of myself, some upstanding man's wife who nods more than she speaks. I get to peeling potatoes, the knife's repetition numbing. Sometimes I think if I make the meals bland enough, they might just blend into the walls, into the air, and I can fade out with them, stop feeling like a damn fool for marrying a man whose sweet nothings turned sour as milk. Then, the silence breaks. Alice, did you pick up my dry cleaning? His voice cuts across the quiet. Forgot, I admit. I'll get it tomorrow. He tsks, a sound that says more than his words do. Never mind, I'll do it myself. Unlike some, I actually get things done. I don't argue. I've learned that much. Dinner goes by in a tense truce, me focusing on not stirring the pot, while he eats like it's just fuel. No words about the food, no words about us. At this point, I'm not sure which would be worse. Life's funny in a twisted sort of way. You wake up, do your thing, go to bed, and somewhere in all of it, you miss the moment everything tipped sideways. For me, it was the hours at work stretched out longer and home, well, that wasn't home no more. At the hospital, my shift seemed like a breeze next to my life with Tom. But damn if those hours weren't piling up like dirty laundry. 12-hour shifts turned into 14, then 16. Gotta make ends meet, right? It was a typical Friday, or whatever day it was. After enough double shifts, they all just sort of blend together. Around the millionth hour, I was sitting in the break room, trying to remember the last time I had a day off. Sarah dropped into the chair next to me, her coffee splashing over the side as she did. You're still here? Jesus, Alice. You plan on just moving in? I tried to smile, but it felt like doing a pull-up after an all-nighter. The bank doesn't cash in smiles, Sarah. You working the late shift again? She asked, the concern in her eyes clear as day. Wringing my hands, I just nodded. Tom thinks we need the extra cash. Bills and all that. Sarah's brows furrowed. Not like he's bringing in any prizes with his job. When do you two even talk? The break room felt too small right then. He's busy, I mumbled, looking away. Busy being king of the castle, she muttered under her breath. I knew better than to argue. He's got a lot on his plate, I offered weakly, knowing even as I said it that Tom's plate was filled with nothing but complaints and excuses. The shift dragged on, my feet dragging along with it. Patience blurred together, suffering brushed past like just another symptom of my day. Heading home, the evening chill matched my mood. I stepped into the house, the silence greeting me like the unwanted neighbor it was. I'm home, I announced to the emptiness. Tom appeared from somewhere, a sour look on his face. Great, you can make dinner now. I'm starving. Sure, Tom, I agreed, dropping my bag by the door. I was too tired for a fight, too tired to stand up and tell him that actually, no, I wasn't put on this earth just to make his dinner. Later, after I'd served a meal I couldn't taste, Tom was jabbing at the proteins and carbs on his plate like they'd done something to insult him. What about that electric bill? They'll shut us off if you don't pay it. Yeah, I know, I said, I'll take care of it tomorrow. And the car needs service. He didn't look up from his plate. That costs, you know. Your pile of shifts actually doing anything to help with that? I swallowed down the lump in my throat. Seems like it never ends, huh? Tom snorted. Sure doesn't. Especially with your pathetic checks. Why I always gotta deal with this crap. Excuses were on the tip of my tongue, a defense ready to spring to my lips, but what was the point? He had his mind set. So I bit down on the words, bit down hard. Later, in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I'd spent so long thinking that if I just kept at it, kept working and washing and saying yes, that maybe things would turn around. But those hours at the hospital, they were shrinking my life down to something I didn't even recognize anymore. And Tom? He'd already faded from the picture. The sound of keys in the door had a way of making my stomach drop. It was like Pavlov's dogs, if Pavlov's dogs had in-laws from hell. Carla and Martin, Tom's folks, had this knack for showing up just when I felt I was about to catch my breath. I hear them before I see them, their voices cutting through the silence of my supposed sanctuary. Alice, darling, I hope we're not intruding, Carla calls out, and yeah, she knew she absolutely was. I made some coffee, Alice dear. Hope it's not as weak as last time, Martin chimed in, and I couldn't help the eye roll. Not that they'd even notice if they saw it. Like unwanted clockwork, there they were in my kitchen, wearing their Sunday best on a Tuesday night, peering over my shoulder. Have you done something new with your hair, Alice? It just seems so limp. Carla's words are like sandpaper, all grit, and no care. Martin, not wanting to be left out of the insult party, adds his bit. And how's our Tommy? You keeping him happy? You know, a happy husband is a happy life. I'm nodding, slicing through carrots with more force than necessary. Tom's fine. And it's happy wife, happy life. Carla laughs, a sound that's like nails on a chalkboard to me. Oh, dear, you have it all mixed up. But that's okay, we can't all be naturals at this wifely business. Just then, Tom walks in, and I'm thinking maybe I can escape to the bathroom or something. Hey, look who's here. Mama's making jokes at Alice again, he says, and I can hear the grin in his voice. Carla beams at him. Just giving her some pointers, darling. Heaven knows she needs them. I clench my jaw, watching Tom laugh it off. Alice, babe, why don't you freshen up a bit? You look tired. It's like I'm not even there and they're discussing the weather or something equally as bland as Tom asks his parents about their day like I'm the help who's just left the room. Later, after what feels like the longest evening of my life, I'm scrubbing at a pot thinking, I can't do this anymore. I'm about to break, about to say something, when Tom leans against the doorframe. Come on, Alice, don't be like that. It's family. Family doesn't make you feel like crap, Tom. Maybe not in fairy tale land, Alice. But in the real world, you gotta take the rough with the smooth, he says, and I can tell he thinks that's the end of it. And when's the smooth coming exactly? Because I've had a rough few months, I shoot back, my voice is sharper than I intend. Tom throws his hands up and walks away. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. That word bounces around my skull as I lie down on the couch because the bed feels like it's on another planet right now. Is it dramatic to want some peace? Some respect? Is it dramatic to not want to listen to your husband and his parents talk about you like you're just a piece of furniture, a piece that's not quite to their taste? I found out about the missing cash when I was at the counter trying to buy a sandwich. My hand dug around, touching nothing but gum wrappers and old receipts. Back home later that day, I cornered Tom in the kitchen. Sink piled high, air thick with silence. Tom, did you borrow cash from my bag? He didn't even pause, stacking dishes with a clatter. Yeah, I needed it. I took a breath, counting to 10. Didn't help much. Needed it for what exactly? He shrugged, a casual lift of shoulders that didn't match the tightness in his voice. Stuff. Men stuff, you wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it or you won't tell me? I snapped, tired of dancing around. He turned then, eyes hard. What's it to you? It's our money, Alice. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. I felt a chill then, deeper than the words he spoke. So you just take it? Without asking? What do I need to ask permission for, huh? I'm the man in this house. There was that word, man, like it explained everything. But mostly, it just explained why I felt alone even when he was right there. So what, I just have to guess when my stuff will go missing now? He glared, and a part of me wished he'd just yell instead of looking at me like that. You get what you give, Alice. Remember that. I wanted to scream, throw something, anything to show how this felt. But I was so damn tired. You think I don't give? Look around, Tom. Look at this house, at me. I give till it hurts. He didn't reply, turning back to the sink, and we both knew he had nothing to say. I left him there with his mess, our silence loud enough to shake the walls. I sat on our bed later, sorting through bank statements. Numbers danced before my eyes, refusing to add up. It wasn't just the cash from today. It was more. Can't sleep? Tom stood at the bedroom door, voice empty of whatever made people human. Just trying to make sense of our accounts. They're all over the place. He leaned against the door frame, a shadow. Maybe you're the one spending without telling. A laugh escaped me before I could lock it up. It wasn't even a good one. Right. Me. You got me, Tom. I've been buying, what exactly? Because I still wear the same clothes, still eat the same food. You're getting sarcastic now? He crossed the room, throwing himself into the chair by the window. Not a good look on you. I didn't want to cry, not in front of him. Just tell me why, Tom. Why are you doing this? He didn't respond, didn't even say goodnight. He just left, door clicking softly behind him in the kind of quiet that roared. It was happening again. Tom, sprawled on the couch, a half-empty bottle dangling from his fingers. The TV was blaring some sitcom, the laugh track mocking me. Tom, come on, not tonight, I said, eyeing the bottle. He looked up, his eyes glazed. Why not? This is the good stuff, Alice. I reached for the bottle, but he pulled it away like we were kids playing keep away. Please, Tom, the drinking. He laughed, and it stung because it didn't reach his eyes. It's the only way I can stand you. That hurt. It cut deeper than any knife could. Am I really that bad? My voice barely above a whisper. He stood up now, a little wobbly, and patted my head like I was the family dog. Nah, you just need to lighten up, babe. I'm trying, Tom. God knows I'm trying. My patience was wearing thin, fraying at the edges. He shrugged and walked to the fridge for another beer. You think your nagging will change anything? I drink because I want to, not because of anything you do or don't do. I followed him, anger replacing the worry. So, this is just you, then? Self-destruct mode full on? Stop making a big deal out of it, he said, snapping the cap off with more force than necessary. A big deal? I raised my voice now, no longer able to contain the frustration. I'm scared, Tom. You're drunk every night, and we're losing us. Us? He laughed loud and hard, but it was as hollow as our bank account. Honey, us checked out a long time ago. My heart was pounding now, each beat screaming at me to do something, anything. So, what? We just pretend? Laugh along with the sitcoms while our life turns into some trashy drama? He leaned close, his breath sour. Nobody's asking you to play pretend, Alice. You don't like it, there's the door. That's done, that he could just throw me away, after all, we've been through. If it's so easy for you, why don't you leave? He snorted and grabbed his jacket. Maybe I will. Have a night out, away from this prison. Go then. See if the bar crowd can put up with your crap, I said, my voice harsher than I meant it to be. The door slammed, echoing in the empty house. I blinked back tears. This wasn't just about the drinking. It was about respect, about love, and whatever was left of our marriage. And I sat there on that too quiet evening, the fake TV laughter rolling over me, asking myself when we'd become such strangers, wondering if the laughing had ever been real. My apartment, a tidy little place downtown, was a piece of my independence. I inherited it from my Aunt May, a spitfire of a woman who never married and always used to say, a woman needs her own set of keys. I rented it out mostly, a little bit of cash flow that didn't depend on Tom. Then one day, Tom says to me, I got this project, gonna be working late. Cancel the lease. I need a spot to crash. Didn't sit right with me, but I did it, told the tenants it was family emergency stuff. A couple weeks in, I get this itch in my brain, like something's off. I'm not nosy by nature, but I need to see. So, I head over to the apartment, mid-evening. I had the spare keys since Aunt May's time. I walk in, and there it was, a whole other life sprawled across my inherited linoleum. Tom, with some woman I don't know, too cozy in the apartment that once belonged to my aunt. My heart didn't just break, it snapped like cheap plastic. His head turns, that grin spreading across his face. The kind of grin that means trouble. Why so surprised, Alice? It's not like you're fun anymore. Something in me went cold, like the freezer where Aunt May used to keep her vodka. Fun, I spat the word out like it tasted bad. So this is your idea of a late night at work? He yawned, stretched like he wasn't just caught in the wrong. Relax, Alice. It's nothing serious. Just blowing off steam, you know? I looked past him at her, sitting on the edge of the bed, grabbing at the sheets. You two have fun, I said, the words sharp as the keys in my pocket. Then I turned, marched myself straight out of that apartment, the door slamming shut like a gavel coming down. Tom just laughed, that ugly laugh of his, as I walked away. But that apartment? That little space was the last thing Aunt May left me. It was supposed to be my safety net, not a web of lies. And in that moment, I saw the whole thing for what it was, a farce. Tom never wanted a place to work late, he wanted a playground. I wasn't gonna be the fool in his game. Not anymore. That was the revelation, not just Tom and his mistress, but the truth that my keys, my independence, was the real love affair I needed to rekindle. Walking into what used to be our home, the place felt suffocating. There I was, in the thick of it all, forcing myself to skim through years stuffed in drawers and closets. Each shirt I folded was like turning a page I had read two wrong times. Every piece folded was another I'm done. I didn't even need the heavy air to tell me, every corner of that place was yelling it at me anyway. The dusty photo frames caught my eye, and for a hot second, I considered wiping them clean. But, nah, let the past catch dust. I pulled out the suitcase, the one with a broken wheel, oh, the irony, and started packing up. Hey, you're making quite a racket there, aren't ya? His voice cut through from the living room, pulling up memories I'd rather keep boxed up. Just packing what's mine, I called back, my voice steady. Taking the good wine glasses? He jabbed, half interested. Don't need 'em. You can toast to your crap alone. A grunt from him and the sound of his boots on the tile. I kept my focus on the suitcase, no, not even a glance his way. Where you gonna go? He tossed out, casual like he's asking about the weather. Away. That's all he needed to know. Need some cash? The offer was flippant, almost mocking. Keep your money. My voice was ice. I'm good. He grunted again, coming closer. Never thought you'd walk out. Neither did I. Surprise, surprise. This how it's gonna be, then? One foot in front of the other, I replied. That much was clear to me. A scoff. You think you'll make it out there? I zipped up the suitcase, my answer firm. I'll survive. You know, you could stay. Stop. Just, stop. He fell quiet then. He knew. I knew. This was overdue. The suitcase full, I snapped it shut. That click was louder than any door slam. I dragged the lopsided luggage behind me, the wonky wheel tapping out my exit rhythm. The silent exodus, no dramatic goodbyes, no audience to my leaving. Just me. Just like it was gonna be from now on. 2 years had gone by when my past decided to make a comeback. I had just emerged from the hospital with spring in my step when I saw them. Tom, looking like a kicked dog, and his mom, who always had a word or 10 to say, hovered near the entrance like dark clouds. Alice, Tom broke out, sounding like he owned the place, which was rich, considering the mess he'd left me in. We need you back. The audacity hit me first, then the laughter. It bubbled up before I could even think to stop it. His mom chimed in, wringing her hands like she was washing the world's guilt off them. It's terrible. We're drowning in debt, and after his dad's stroke, we need someone to take care, she rambled. Tom straightened up and said, I'm willing to forgive you and let you come back. His words came out like he was doing me a favor. I could only laugh. I laughed till tears threatened the corners of my eyes, not of anguish, but a release of something heavy, a chain of the past falling off. That's when a man's voice cut through the tangle. Everything okay here? We all turned. It was Ian, standing there, our little girl cradled in his arms. Her cheeks were rosy, her eyes curious, untouched by the mess, just a few feet away from her. This is my husband, Ian, I said with pride in my voice that echoed firm and true. And our daughter, Lily. The shock on Tom and his mother's faces could have powered the city for days. My life had moved on while they'd remained stuck, playing reruns of a show no one wanted to watch again. Tom's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. His mom looked like she'd swallowed a wasp. The difference from 2 years ago struck me then, how much standing there meant. It wasn't about who I stood beside, it was about who I stood as. Stronger, surer, and wrapped in the kind of joy that doesn't fade. I steered Ian and Lily away from the demands, the debt, away from a history that could only ever be just that, history. The cemetery was full, the air quiet except for the scattered whispers of those who came to pay their respects. There I was, Sarah, stuck in my wheelchair, feeling like an island in the middle of a somber black ocean. My dad, John, was there too, cracking jokes as if we were at a backyard barbecue instead of Mom's funeral. Elaine, with her hawk-like eyes and that smile that never quite reached them, was by his side. She was the nurse who was supposed to make things easier after Mom got sick, but all she did was make my skin crawl. Dad, how can you be laughing at a time like this? I asked, my hands tight on the wheels of my chair. He looked at me, his chuckle trailing off as he wiped a hand across his face. Oh, lighten up, will you? Life goes on. Besides, she'd want us to be happy. Happy? I almost shouted. Mom's not even cold, and you're. Enough, Sarah, he cut me off, his voice harsh. Put a cap on it, will ya? I stilled, the lump in my throat growing. Aunt Grace came over, laying a hand on my shoulder in a bid to calm me. Sweetheart, let's not do this here, she whispered, sounding as tired as I felt. I nodded, watching as Dad turned back to Elaine, who was eyeing me like a cat waiting for a mouse to make a move. Uncle George, Mom's brother and always a pillar of quiet strength, joined Aunt Grace by my side. He gave me a slight nod, his face showing the lines that grief had etched deeper. Don't let him get to you, George murmured, handing me a tissue. I'm not, I lied, wiping at my eyes. The preacher was talking now, saying words about God, life, and the hereafter, but it all sounded like static. My mind was elsewhere, on Dad and Elaine, the way they were too close, the way she was with him all the time now, how he needed her support. As people moved to throw dirt onto the casket, Dad's laugh rang out again. It was loud and grating. I caught bits and pieces of what he said to one of Mom's old friends. Yeah, it's rough, but what can you do, huh? Gotta keep on truckin'. I couldn't stay silent. Dad, I said louder than I intended, don't you think you could pretend, just for today? He turned to me, his eyes narrowed. Sarah, don't start. Pretend? That's rich comin' from you, Elaine chimed in, her voice sharp. You're always the victim. I looked at her, feeling the anger rising. What's that supposed to mean? Girls, not now, Aunt Grace said, trying to smooth things over like she always did. Yeah, Sarah. Give it a rest, Dad added with a dismissive wave, before turning his back on me. As folks started to disperse, I talked with some of Mom's friends and our distant relatives. The usual she was such a good person, and if you need anything, let us know, filled the air. They meant well, I knew that, but their words felt empty. George wheeled me back to the van after it was all over, Aunt Grace following silently. I can't believe him, I muttered as we neared the vehicle. He's always been rough around the edges, George said, his eyebrows coming together. That's one way to put it, I scoffed. Aunt Grace helped me get into the van, her hands gentle. You know he's grieving in his own way, she said. I nodded, though inside I felt a storm brewing. His way of grieving didn't sit right with me, not at all. The ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that weighs on you, heavy as a blanket. I stared out the window, watching the world go on as if nothing had happened. It felt like a betrayal, the sun shining, people walking their dogs, laughing. When we got to my house, where Elaine was now a constant presence, I felt trapped. This was supposed to be home, but it felt nothing like it used to, with Mom's laughter echoing off the walls, her love filling up the rooms. Since the spinal injury, my life felt like a series of unfortunate events, each day bringing a new challenge. I wasn't just learning to navigate my new reality, I was also learning to deal with the person who was supposed to be my helper, Elaine, the nurse. The first incident with Elaine felt like an honest mistake. She had brought me a cup of tea, her hands seemingly unsteady. I remember watching in horror as the cup tilted, the hot liquid pouring down onto my lap. Pain seared through me, not just from the burn, but from the shock of betrayal. It was just an accident, Sarah, she had said, all innocent-like, but her eyes didn't meet mine, and her voice was too even. I wanted to tell her I knew that look, the look of someone hiding something, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, soaked and scalded, trying to nurse my wound and my pride. The next torment came on a day that seemed just as ordinary as any had been since my accident. Elaine left me alone in the garden, saying I could use some fresh air. That wasn't unusual, but what happened next was. She forgot to close the gate. One moment I was alone, and the next, I was encircled by a pack of stray dogs, their eyes on me, growls filling the silence. Fear clenched my heart as they drew closer. I couldn't move, couldn't escape. Elaine watched from the window, motionless. It took George, coming by for his visit, to rescue me from what could have been a gruesome fate. When I told my parents, especially Dad, about how Elaine had been acting, I was met with nothing but cold disbelief. You're just seeing things, Sarah. You're angry and frustrated. I understand that, but Elaine is here to help, my dad had said defensively. I shot back with all the bitterness I could muster. Is she, Dad? Because it seems like she's doing everything but. His face hardened, and then he said something that left me feeling raw and hollow. You're just jealous of her. She can walk. She's healthy. You're not. That stung deep. It wasn't about jealousy, it was about feeling safe in my own home. And it was clear after that conversation that my safety was less important than confronting an uncomfortable truth. I was alone in this, well, almost alone. I had George and I had my own wits about me. And as the evening drew in, casting long shadows across my room, I realized that if I wanted to feel safe again, to take back some control, I would need to fight this battle myself. It was a terrifying thought, but there was no alternative. The smell of tension was thick in the air as I rolled into the kitchen, my hands trembling at the thought of what I had to say. I could feel my frustration boiling over as I thought about how Dad never showed any love towards Mom or me. He made it abundantly clear that all he saw when he looked at us was money and the inconvenience we represented. Dad, why do you even stay if you don't care about us? Just for the money? I asked with a mix of anger and sorrow. He didn't even flinch, just leaned back against the counter with a smirk. Someone had to tell you, I suppose. Your grandfather's gone, and I don't have to pretend anymore. You're vile, I spat, the words tasting bitter on my lips. He shrugged, nonchalant. You know, your mom begged me to tell her why I was always late. So, I laid it out plain and simple for her. I married her for her daddy's money. And now that he's out of the picture, I don't have to play nice. Mom's eyes were drowned in sorrow, but she didn't move, didn't speak. I couldn't understand her silence, her acceptance. Why do you let him treat you this way? I asked her, rolling closer, so she couldn't ignore me. She wrung her hands, looking down at them as if the answers might be hidden in her palms. Because I love him, she mumbled, a broken record repeating the same sad tune. That's your reason? My voice cracked, heavy with the weight of my tears. He calls me a worthless invalid, a parasite, and says I'm just taking up space. How can you love someone like that? She looked at me then, her eyes rimmed red. Sarah, love isn't always simple. It isn't always kind. I let out a sob, her words were like knives. She still clung to whatever scraps of love he used to pretend to give her. Meanwhile, every awful thing he said to me, about me, gouged out pieces of my heart, leaving me hollower each time. You're crying because you know it's true. That's all you are, Sarah. A burden. Always have been. My father's voice cut through the room, each word a calculated blow trying to knock me down further. I couldn't hold back the sobs that racked my body, feeling each word like a physical blow. Why are you like this? I choked out. He shrugged, as if my pain was nothing more than a speck of dust to him. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Mom finally sprang to life, her voice a whisper but fierce all the same. Stop it. That's our daughter you're talking about. He gave a dry laugh. And she's as pathetic as you are, both of you, under my feet all day. I turned away from them both, my heart splintering into sharp, jagged pieces. I didn't want to see his contempt or her resigned pain anymore. I couldn't fathom how this was the same man she had loved, the same man who was my father. That night was a game changer. The house was quiet, too quiet. I was heading to the kitchen for some water when I saw them. Dad and Elaine from next door, all cozy on the couch. The moment hit me like a slap in the face. I didn't make a sound, just watched for a second before backing out of the room. The image was burned into my head, though. I found Mom in her bedroom, reading a magazine like everything was normal. It wasn't. Mom, I need to tell you something, I blurted out, my voice shaky but urgent. She put her magazine down and sat up, honed in on my face. What's wrong? She asked, brows knitted. I swallowed hard, the words taking their sweet time. I saw Dad with Elaine, they were. Her face went from concern to dark, real quick. I see. When? Just now, in the living room, I said, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. She didn't say a word for a minute, just stood up, and went straight for the living room. I trailed behind her, kinda scared but knowing this had to be done. The two of them were still there, laughing at something on TV. But the laughs died as soon as Mom walked in. Dad's face, it was priceless. "Oh, Sarah. I'll handle this," Mom whispered to me without taking her eyes off them. Then she turned her fire on Dad. "So this is what you do? This is how you get your kicks?" Dad stood up, acting all innocent. "What's the problem? We're just watching a show." Mom was having none of it. "Cut the crap, we're not stupid," she snapped. Elaine must have figured out it was time to go because she headed for the door fast. "I better go," she muttered, but Mom stopped her right there. "Sit," Mom commanded. Elaine sat. We'll deal with later. But you," Mom turned to Dad, "you're gonna regret your selfishness. You think you can mess around in my house?" Dad tried to say something, but Mom wasn't done. "And you," she said to me, "go to your room. This ain't for the kids." "But Mom." "Go. Please, Sarah." I turned and went to my room, the yelling starting up behind me. I left the door open just a crack and listened. There were some things that couldn't be unsaid once they were out there. Dad's voice got loud. "So what if I am? You gonna throw me out? Over her?" Mom fired back, louder. "You're damn right I will. You're trash, and I'm done." The fight went on for what felt like hours. Accusations flying, hard words that couldn't be taken back. It ended with Dad storming out, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. Life flipped on its head when we got the call about Mom's accident. The confusion was one thing, Dad marrying Elaine was a whole new level of low. But the kicker was when he looked at me with those dead eyes of his and dropped the bomb. "I'm tired of dealing with this cripple. It's time she's someone else's problem," he hissed. His voice was harsh, and it echoed in the emptying house. I felt like something inside me was crumbling. I'd never been anything but an inconvenience to him, but hearing it said out loud, it was a different kind of pain. That's when Uncle George barged in, old tweed jacket and all, just as the words hung in the air like smoke. "She's not a problem, she's family, and she's coming with me." Dad laughed, a nasty, grating sound. "What, you? Gonna play daddy? Good riddance. Take her." Uncle George didn't even blink. "Yeah, I'll take her. Someone's gotta show the girl some decency." "You think you can do better? Be my guest," Dad sneered, crossing his arms as if he'd won some twisted game. Uncle George just turned to me, ignoring the poison in the air. "Pack your stuff, kiddo. We're leaving this dump." I nodded, trying to ignore the lump in my throat. "Give me 10 minutes. I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Take your time. We ain't in a rush," Uncle George replied, and I caught the hint of a smile. In my room, surrounded by what was left of my old life, I shoved clothes and essentials into a bag. Each item felt like a piece of a puzzle I didn't understand yet. Dad's voice boomed from the hallway as I zipped the bag closed. "Make sure she takes all her crap. Don't want anything left reminding me of this mess." Uncle George's reply was calm, steady as a rock. "Only crap in this house is your attitude." I tried not to listen, tried to focus on the sound of the zipper instead of the break in my heart. When I wheeled out of my room, bag on my lap, Uncle George was waiting. His gaze stuck to Dad for a brief moment, there was no love lost there. He looked back at me, his eyes soft. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," I said, forcing a smile. But somewhere under the fear and betrayal, there was this tiny, fragile sense of something new. Hope, maybe. We left without looking back. Dad's voice echoed in the empty hallway behind us, but it was fading, getting drowned out by the sound of Uncle George's old sedan firing up. 2 months had whooshed past when a knock rattled the front door at Uncle George's place. There he was, Dad, his appearance scruffy, eyes wild. "Sarah, you're rich. Your mother left everything to you." He blurted it out like it was gonna fix everything, like money could gloss over the rotten things he'd done. "And why would she do that for me, huh, Dad?" "Because you betrayed her, that's why." I shot back, my voice heavy with a mix of scorn and disbelief. Dad shuffled his feet, looking anywhere but at me. "Look, I know I messed up, but nothing," Uncle George cut in, his voice hard as nails. "You made your bed, now get lost. You can't just shut me out. I'm her father," Dad protested, his voice cracking with desperation. "Funny way of showing it, turning up after all this time, 'cause there's money in the wind." Uncle George's stance was like a tree, firm and unyielding. His words hung there, stinging with truth. Dad looked deflated, smaller somehow. "Isn't there anything you want from me?" "Yeah," I said, gripping my chair's armrests. "I want you to leave." The words felt like pebbles rolling off my tongue, heavy and final. Dad's face twisted, and for a split second, I saw something like pain flicker in his eyes. He stumbled backward off the porch, gave one last pitiful look, and walked away. Uncle George slammed the door and turned to me, eyebrows raised. "You good?" I nodded, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The silence in the house was filled with the weight of what had just happened, but it felt right. It felt just. Later, sitting with the lawyer, the numbers and talks of estates and accounts washed over me. It was a lot, more than I'd ever imagined. "So, you're telling me all this is mine?" I asked, pointing at the papers spread out on the kitchen table. "Yes, Sarah. It's all yours, every cent," the lawyer confirmed with a nod. Reality was sinking in, slowly, a little shocking and a lot overwhelming. Uncle George whistled low. "Guess your mom made sure you'd be okay." I couldn't help but smile, bittersweet as it was. "Yeah, she did, didn't she?" Uncle George ruffled my hair, something only he could get away with. "Your mom was a smart woman." Peering out the window, I couldn't help but catch the drama unfolding like a car crash you can't look away from. Elaine was out there shredding Dad apart with her words. "I don't need this, I don't need an old broke man." Her voice was shrill, slicing through the quiet street like a siren. "Elaine, please, I love you. I have nothing without you." Dad reached for her arm, but she shook him off like he was some annoying bug, not her husband of the past few years. I could almost see his heartbreak from here, the way his posture crumbled. Once a towering figure, now just a crumpled shell. Elaine snorted. "Love? Don't make me laugh. You're useless to me now. Find someone else to leech off." With those words, she stormed off, her heels clicking against the pavement like a stopwatch, counting down the seconds of Dad's dignity as it crumbled away. Leaning back from the window, I sat down heavily at the kitchen table where Uncle George was doing the crossword, unaware of the soap opera that just ended outside. "Elaine's gone," I said bluntly. "Figured she would. The woman's got the loyalty of a cat in a fish shop." He didn't look up from his paper. I huffed a laugh, despite the heaviness of this situation. "What now?" "Now? You live your life," Uncle George said, filling in an answer with a confident scribble. But guilt gnawed at me. Shouldn't we help him? "Sarah, there's a difference between helping someone who falls into a hole and someone who digs one for himself and jumps in." He finally looked up at me with those clear eyes of his. "You're right," I sighed, my gaze drifting back to the window, half expecting to see Dad still standing there. But he was gone. The rest of the day passed quietly, the neighborhood unaware of the little drama that had just shifted the tides in our small world. At bedtime, as I stared up at the ceiling, Dad's broken figure haunted the edges of my thoughts. Elaine had shown her colors, and they were as stark as a winter sky. Had we ever been a family? Or was it all just pretty lies wrapped around ugly truths? Sleep didn't come easy that night. I had money, sure. A new life, yeah. But there in the quiet, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't name. And I had a creeping feeling it was up to me to make sure it didn't all just fall apart. Please, Sarah. Let me stay. I have nowhere to go. Dad stood at my doorstep, fumbling with the hem of his weathered coat, looking a far cry from the imposing man he once was. You've made your bed, Dad. Now sleep in it. My words were cold, necessary ice. I had to be strong, for my own sake. He sighed, a deep, rattling breath that seemed to shake his fragile frame. Without another word, he turned, his steps heavy as he walked away. And then, as I watched him go, Esther, my new nurse, came up beside me. You okay? Yeah, I replied. I have to be. Esther just nodded, knowing better than to push. That's what I appreciated about her, she gave me space to breathe. The week that followed was a blur of activity. Meetings with Uncle George and Aunt Grace did more than fill my days, they were healing the old wounds with a salve made of genuine care. So, what's next for you, Sarah? Aunt Grace asked one evening, her voice as straightforward as the rest of her. Picking up the pieces, I guess. Building something, mine, I said, my hands folding around a coffee mug, a piece of normalcy. Uncle George chuckled, "Atta girl. That's the spirit." It felt good, creating a new routine, finding some footing on this unfamiliar path. But it was not without its hurdles. Sarah, have you thought more about that job offer? Esther's voice broke through my thoughts one afternoon. Yeah, I mumbled, but can I leave the past behind? You don't leave it, she said, her voice firm but gentle. You build on it. I pondered her words, realizing there was wisdom there. I didn't have to forget where I came from, but I didn't have to live there either. So I dove in. Took the job. Spent my days learning, growing stronger, both in mind and heart. The work was hard, but rewarding. And surprisingly, my past, the pain and the fallouts, shaped me, gave me an edge. I connected, understood, and empathy became my tool. Evenings were for family, real family. And my home began filling with laughter, the sounds of Uncle George's terrible jokes, Esther's calm wisdom, and Aunt Grace's no-nonsense love. Ever think you'd get here? Esther asked one evening as we relaxed in the living room. Not in a million years, I admitted. Life's funny like that, Uncle George interjected with a smirk. Just when you think you've got it figured out, it throws a pie in your face. More like a damn hurricane, I countered with a smile. A hurricane that cleared the path, Aunt Grace said, echoing the thoughts I hadn't dared to voice. I looked around at these people, my people. We were an odd bunch, a patchwork family, but we fit together somehow, like pieces in a puzzle I didn't know I was completing. You know, I started, a warmth spreading through me as I spoke, all this talk of weather makes me think we've weathered the storm pretty well. There she is, Uncle George nodded, raising his mug. Our Sarah, stronger than the toughest gale. Esther raised her glass too, and Aunt Grace followed, their smiles saying more than words ever could. So, I raised my mug, a silent thank you to the past for forging my future, to the struggles that showed me my strengths, and to the realization that sometimes, the hardest thing and the right thing were the same.